The early days of Warner Brothers were kind of a free-for-all, I think, as far as directors went. I think everybody was sort of jockeying for position to prove themselves as a director. So you have guys like Ben Hardaway who are starting out with a few shorts of their own. You had Norm McCabe coming up around World War II with a unit of his own and making some pretty good cartoons. But really, you know, the race was won by guys like Chuck Jones and Bob Clampett, Friz Freleng.
Harmonizing. They started Looney Tunes, you know. If they hadn't made their little pilot, Bosco the Talking Kid, which basically made on their own money and trying to get the concept. Sound was so primitive at that point, they didn't even know how to do lip sync properly.
Well, here I is, and I sure feel good.
So Bosco the Talking Kid helped them work that out and create a character that could talk.
Who is I? I'm Bosco.
And that's why they called him the Talk Ink Kid. Bosco was one of the first characters where they used a lot of dialogue.
I mean, the style of an early harmonizing cartoon was not a lot of plot, not a lot of characterization, any gag that would work. And, you know, they didn't spend at that time an awful lot of effort trying to make the animation beautiful or realistic. So they would basically be throwing in mostly gags that would work, first of all, synchronized to music.
Another thing Hugh and Rudy started that was a Looney Tunes tradition was breaking the fourth wall.
Howdy, folks.
Like where he's playing the piano and Bosco in person, you know. He's Bosco in person because he's performing on a stage. He's performing for everybody. Like, I love the scene where Honey is applauding, you know, Bosco's dance, and she makes a gesture, you know, come on, you know, everybody applaud.
The fact is that you cannot exclude Disney from the harmonizing universe.
Okay, fellas, on with the band.
They worked with him in Kansas City, as did Friz Freleng. And the influence on those early harmonizing cartoons that they made on their own after they left Disney is very, very clear.
Hugh's motivation was always to try to beat Disney because he didn't like Walt, you know, and he felt very competitive with him. He was always trying to come up with something more elaborate or, you know, with more characters in it, and always trying to up the budget. Like, that's why he and Rudy left Leon, was that they had a big fight over the budget. Leon was trying to keep them pretty much clamped to a certain dollar amount, and Hugh resisted.
Well, we gotta do something.
Even once they left Warner Brothers and went to MGM, harmonizing were always striving to make films that could compete with the best of Disney. I think they felt that that was such a strong influence and such a goal to aim for. I think they really spent their entire careers doing it, both at Warner Brothers and at MGM.
Gosh, they started so many things in the industry. And they were with Walt Disney in Kansas City. You know, they're like Ben Hardaway. They're at the very beginning of Hollywood animation.
Jack King was a Disney animator that Schlesinger hired. He thought he was getting a really prestigious director. Jack King's cartoons were serviceable. They're okay, they're fun. He specialized in those really fat Porky Pig cartoons where Porky is, you know, really at his most grotesque. Whereas Avery had fun with that. King really just directed him like that's the actor he is, and we'll direct him in that the way, as so.
He wound up directing Buddy cartoons. He directed Buddy's Bearcats, and he directed a wonderful cartoon called Buddy's Lost World, which has a lot of dinosaurs in it. And maybe Bob Clampett saw that and got the idea for Cecil, because at the end, like the dog, Bozo, and the big dinosaur are slurp-kissing Buddy, who's sitting in the middle. And there's a lot of really difficult stuff, like a three-quarter down shot with a dinosaur rounding a corner with his head coming out in perspective, almost like a 3D shot. King loved that kind of staging. He loved to do exaggerated foreshortening. And he had a characteristic take, like if a character's afraid of something, all of his hair stands on end, and if he's wearing glasses, the glasses flip off the head, do a 360 and come back on, likewise with the hat. He was one of the first guys after Friz to take the Animal Our Gang concept, which Porky came out of, and try to make that viable. He used beans and he used these little puppies, Ham and X. Shanghai Shipmates was one of his cartoons. He did a lot of far shots. He didn't seem to be too comfortable with close-ups. He wasn't good with characterization, but he was really good with action. Maybe that's his background as an animator again coming through. He was just terrific at that stuff.
King, I don't think, lasted long there for a variety of reasons. I think Warner's was heading in a certain direction, and that direction was the direction that Tex Avery and Frank Tashlin were going.
I think he was a serviceable director, but he went on to do very good work at Disney's later on, you know, doing Donald Duck cartoons and things like that. So I think it was just early days. I think it's just one of those things where he was cutting his teeth, learning the craft at the time. So I don't think you can really level too much criticism at it when the entire nature of the medium was still being created at the time. Bob Iwerks, you know, was really Walt Disney's right hand. And, you know, he really came up with the design for Mickey Mouse and animated those first seminal cartoons like Plain Crazy and Galloping Gaucho and Steamboat Willie and Skeleton Dance and the Silly Symphonies series. He was an amazing, facile draftsman.
Leon needed a couple extra Looney Tunes. His plant was full, so he gave the 2 cartoons to Ub to do.
At the Ub Iwerks studio, Chuck Jones and Bob Clampett went over to supervise 2 cartoons, Porky's Super Service and Porky and Gabby.
Sure a swell day to go camping, isn't it, Gabby?
It's interesting, those cartoons really aren't any more unique. They don't look like they were done by a different studio or anything. They look like they were done at Schlesinger. They're good Porky cartoons.
Okay, all right.
They're really a forerunner of what Clampett's unit was going to be. They really look like the early Clampett cartoons.
You can see a little bit, especially in Gabby, some of Iwerks' little trademarks, like the little sparks coming out of the head to show astonishment. Little things like that. His Ub-like little comic strip, kind of like ideologues, like little question marks popping out of the head. But I think basically Ub's attitude was he was slumming, you know? He was just taking this stuff on because he needed the work.
I mean, they turned out to be fine cartoons. I think people were just surprised that they didn't turn out to be Ub Iwerks Looney Tunes, you know, and continued, you know, being a technical innovator. He worked on Alfred Hitchcock's The Birds, and he went back to Disney's as kind of their head of special processes, creating a lot of the blue screen and yellow screen techniques that they used on films like Mary Poppins. He always had a niche for, you know, the things that he was genius at. And I think that's really what he's best remembered for.
Bugs Hardaway had a major impact at Warner Brothers, but not necessarily as a director. But he's the namesake of Bugs Bunny.
You don't have to be crazy to do that, but it sure helps.
Ben Hardaway was really a great guy. I really enjoyed meeting and being with him. His nickname was Bugs. We always called him Bugs.
Bugs Hardaway was a story man at Warner Brothers who got to become a director.
When Friz Freleng left to go to MGM, he was promoted to director. And so he was always standing in his doorway around noontime. And I went by one day and I said, "So congratulations, Bugs, what are you going to be doing?" He says, "I'm going to put a rabbit suit on that duck." So I figured what he meant. He was going to do a rabbit character with the characteristics of Daffy.
Go get him, Zero.
Pretty soon I noticed that we were painting a rabbit picture in black and white, and it was called Porky's Hare Hunt. The rabbit was not really a likable character at the time.
Here I am, fat boy.
But it seemed like everybody in the public who saw that movie liked it. And so they decided to make another rabbit picture. And they gave the assignment to Chuck Jones. And the same thing happened. And so they decided to make another one. This time they decided to make the rabbit gray. And so Bugs and Cal Dalton got the assignment for the next rabbit picture. And this time they gave Charlie Thorson, who was our character designer, the job to do a gray rabbit. And he did a gray rabbit with other positions so that it was like a model sheet. and on it he signed Bugs' Bunny. And we heard that the same day that it happened, that our rabbit was going to be named Bugs Bunny.
We just think of Bugs Bunny as a fun alliterative name, but it means crazy rabbit or crazy bunny.
I'm so goony, loony, toony, touched in the head.
Really, his style of, I think it's him and Avery, put them together, and you've got what you think of as that classic Warner Brothers feeling, you know, from that late 30s, early 40s period. That wise guy, smart aleck kind of character.
I think you've got something there, buddy.
That Bugs Bunny was, and the sense of gags, the pace of the gags in the cartoons. This is something that Bugs Hardaway did. But of course, this isn't the Bugs Bunny character that we all came to know and love when he appeared in Tex Avery's A Wild Hare years later.
To a certain extent, even though his films were not as polished as, say, Avery's films, he still had that spirit of everything is nuts that I think was part of the whole Looney Tunes package and started to develop. I mean, basically, if you imagine that the Warner's cartoons were the anti-Disney, when Avery and his followers were kind of leading the charge.
Frizz came back. He left MGM. He wasn't happy there. So Bugs was put back in the story department. And I think he was kind of hurt by that. And pretty soon he got a job at Walter Lantz, and he created Woody Woodpecker. That was, as far as I know, that's the last time I saw Bugs Hardaway.
One reason we don't hear more about Norm McCabe today is because all of the cartoons he did were in black and white. They were mostly Porky Pigs. Norm McCabe made capable cartoons and occasionally made great ones. Just wall-to-wall fun and wild caricatures and a great comment on what was going on in the world.
This is bad.
Norm started as an animator for just in the general pool, and then he wound up working on all the black and white Clampetts. He was one of Clampett's best animators. Clampett usually wound up giving him the dialogue scenes to do. And Norm's trademark, if you look at his animations, he's always tilting the head like this and always trying difficult angles on the head. And it's especially evident in his dialogue stuff. And he drew really well in that style, in that black and white Clampett style.
He took over what was Bob Clampett's unit, and he continued making these great black and white cartoons.
Good morning, patients.
A cartoon I like is the Daffy Duckaroo, which is a crazy, loony Daffy Duck cartoon. Really just a classic Daffy Duck cartoon on an Indian reservation. Again, most of his cartoons were done during the early wartime period.
We don't use any ammunition, folks. We save it all for the Army.
And they all feature heavy war-related gags, topical humor of that time. So a lot of them don't play that well to modern audiences only because of these gags to do with ration books, ration stamps.
My favorite cartoon he did was Hop and Go, which is this jumping contest between a kangaroo and two little rabbits, sort of like Scotch rabbits. And Pinto Colvig did the voice of the kangaroo, you know, who also did Goofy for Disney.
And I got a certificate to prove it.
I love that character, you know.
Norm McCabe somehow got saddled with probably the most politically incorrect wartime cartoons ever made at the studio. I mean, really politically incorrect. But as such, I mean, one of the probably the worst one is Tokyo Jokyo.
Yamamoto will dictate peace terms in the White House.
Yet, his films, I think, did have a kind of personality to them. They weren't Clampett, they weren't Freeling, they weren't Jones. They actually had their own kind of, you know, offbeat personality to them.
Name me a poison, kid.
He, out of all of them, might have been the one that could have gotten a personal voice that could have held his own with some of the others. But for whatever reason, I guess, and it might have been because he was the last director still directing in black and white, I believe, that he just never got the chance.
He was working like right up to the end of his life, just doing whatever he could do. He's an amazing man. I got to know him a little bit. And incredibly modest about his Looney Tunes. He hated them all. We had a show of them one time at the ASIFA office over in North Hollywood, and poor Norm was suffering through every one. He said, "Oh, turn those off. I can't stand looking at them." Artie Davis came from the silent era. He had worked on Crazy Cat, and I think he even worked on Coco the Clown and all that kind of stuff for Max Fleisch in New York. He goes clean back to the 1920s.
I knew him before I was in the cartoon business because he lived in the same apartment building with his father that I did. And I'd always talk to him and kid around with him, but we never discussed cartoons. I think he first came as an animator and then he became a director. And he directed some nice cartoons.
What's up, Doc?
When Bob Clampett left the studio in 1945, Art Davis was given his unit to make cartoons in, be the director in.
I think Art Davis is worth remembering, worth looking at again, simply because he made some very funny cartoons, particularly when he was working with that Bill Scott and Lloyd Turner running stories for him. He made some cartoons that are among the funniest Warner Brothers cartoons ever made. What Makes Daffy Duck comes to mind immediately. They have a lot of the same vitality, a lot of the same energy that you have in the best Clampett cartoons, for example.
Here you are, kiddo.
He made a great series of cartoons. He's sort of the cult director at Warner Brothers. A lot of the fans love the Art Davis cartoons because they are completely crazy in a way that Clampett's weren't. They're almost in their own little universe. When Art Davis did Sylvester, it was his own strange Sylvester.
Vitamins? Well, how do you get vitamins?
When Art Davis did Pepe Le Pew, believe it or not, he did. It's his own strange Pepe Le Pew. He even did one Bugs Bunny cartoon, and it's not like any of the others. One of my favorite Davises is Do Re Meow, which just features a parrot and a really dumb cat named Heathcliff.
Louie is my friend, yes, sir, my best little pal.
He did a wonderful cartoon, one of my favorites, called Catch as Cats Can, which is Sylvester and this Bing Crosby kind of parrot.
Look, Junior, how many times have I told you to button up your tonsils?
And there's a Frank Sinatra canary, and then he's got the Sinatra and Crosby feud going on, and Sylvester's all mixed up in it.
First of all, he had a great sense of energy in his cartoons. The characters really moved around a lot, and he had some great animators on them, like Bill Melendez, and he had Emery Hawkins. He had some really, really terrific animators. And it wasn't the same as Clampett's.
Farewell, stupid!
A little more toned down than Clampett's, but he could get a little more character out of it. You know, you can always look at an Art Davis scene and there's going to be drawings in it that make you laugh. So I think he had a huge contribution for the studio.
Warner Brothers decided to cut down the amount of units. They had 4 units of directors going, and last guy in was first guy out, and that was Art Davis. So they cut his unit completely, and Freeling recognized what a great animator he was and thought he could be very valuable to him and asked him if he would stay.
I done a bad thing.
He stayed with Friz Freeling for many, many years as one of his top animators. Later, when Friz Freeling started the Patty Freeling studio, Art Davis got a chance to direct cartoons again with the Pink Panther.
Because his unit was so short-lived before he was shut down, he doesn't get the recognition he deserves. You take, say, the best 3 or 4 Art Davis cartoons, stack them up against the best cartoons of the other directors, and you have, he comes off very well. If a man is going to be judged by his very best work, then Art Davis does very well indeed.
These directors shouldn't be forgotten. They all contributed a piece to the greatness of what Warner Brothers cartoons are and how we remember them today. We all have great moments we remember from many, many different cartoons. And a lot of these great moments are in the cartoons made by these unsung directors.
They were important. They were creating work at the time that contributed to the overall feeling of what a Warner's cartoon was. And I think that's really their legacy more than anything else. They were there, and they have a body of work that's just as vital as the guys who became more famous.